Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is Military Spouse Advocacy Network, and our employment advocate, Rose Holland, is going to present this amazing webinar on federal hiring process. We want to thank you again for being with us. We hope that you learn a lot from this webinar. Please feel free to ask questions, and then, of course, Rose is going to provide you more information and what we are going to be doing throughout the webinar. And at the end, we are going to do the giveaways. We have 5 gift cards, $25 each, to Starbucks, and we hope that you all enjoy it. And please let us know if you have any questions. So now I'm gonna give it to Rose, and let's hope for learning a lot. And like I said, at the end, you can also send Rose some feedback through the emails or send them to MSAN, so that we can make improvements for the next webinar. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Rose Holland. I have worked employment readiness at Army Community Service. Currently, I'm actually working as a lead trainer for another organization in the federal government. What I'm going to be talking about today is a lot of information. We're going to talk a little bit about your account. A lot of this is going to be focused on understanding the job posting as well as the process. The federal process is very different. However, unlike what a lot of people think, it is not that it is more difficult. It is just more time consuming. In some ways, it's actually easier because they give you a lot more information. The challenge is, how do you rifle through that information? And this is where understanding that job posting is really going to help. We're going to touch on how to apply, the required documentation, and you'll see that is very, very important. One of the most important things about the federal application is the questionnaire. So we'll kind of digest what is that, how does it work? What does it mean to be an expert? Because that's really the key, how you document that. And finally, we're going to talk about how do you put all of this information together into a resume. So I hope you're all ready for the ride. If you have not yet, I strongly suggest you download the toolkit. What you're going to find is in the right-hand corner of a lot of the slides is going to be these page numbers, just like here. And that's going to refer to where in our part 1 of our federal career guide, this is located. You'll notice we skip all the way to page 8. So I'm really not going to touch on the spouse preference. There have been a number of webinars available through OPM, through various agencies on the different preferences. There's a lot of websites in our guide. There's a lot of information about those preferences, but they are important. So let's, start talking about creating your account and what this all means. If you haven't already done so, you want to create your account. And just like every other job site, it's going to ask you for a lot of information. Well, it is to your advantage to start out and fill out all that information, complete your profile, upload your documents. And there's just a lot of different things that a little bit more than a normal job website is going to cover, but it's going to help you. One of the things that asks you in your profile is, do you qualify for a special hiring option? This is really, really, really important. And I'm going to kind of hound on this a lot today. You're going to see these links and they're going to ask you. And one of the things, as a military spouse, if you PCSed with your spouse within the past 2 years, that their orders are within the past 2 years, you qualify for a couple of different programs. If you got married the day after your spouse arrived to their duty station, well, you're going to miss out on this, but there may be some other programs you qualify. If you're a veteran, normally you have to have served 180 days or more. If you are 30% or more disabled veteran, If you were a former employee and you have reinstatement rights, if you are a Scheduled A disabled, and there's a lot of information on all these things. But what this allows you to do, it allows you to search as a current federal employee because you have one of these special hiring options. In some areas, that can double the amount of jobs that you have available. So this is not, just a little tiny thing. Uploading your documents. What documents do you want to upload? Well, if you want your education counted post-high school, you really have to upload your transcripts. And even if you're really old like me and graduated in 1980 something, you still have to upload those transcripts. I know corporate world isn't going to do that. They don't care once you have it, but upload that transcript. And you want your transcripts to say degree conferred and say what that degree is. If for some reason your transcript doesn't, include a copy of your diploma so that it shows. You also notice on here it says, do not use your Social Security number. Don't do it, because I've had 2 clients who their entire application was tossed because they had a Social Security number on one of their forms. So really pay attention to those kinds of things. The other thing is, make sure you label your documents clearly. So this is something that I learned because I hadn't been. So I had to go through and look at every single one of my documents. So label it. If it's a transcript from a specific school, like I labeled transcript, St. Norbert College, transcript, UW-Milwaukee. So I know which they are. As a military spouse, for the spousal preference, 2 other very, very important documents that you want to load is your marriage certificate and a copy of your spouse's most recent orders. And I actually label them which orders they're for. Part of why you want to do this is you might get called and have 24 hours to apply and be on vacation on the lake and not have those documents in there. So this is from experience, can you tell? So make sure you have everything uploaded that you're possibly going to need. Any kind of key proof that you have a certification, a licensure, if you're a nurse, if I had a client who was a welder, so having his certification that proved that he was a journeyman welder was really important for him. It made a big difference whether he qualified for a job. So anything like that, scan and upload it. If you don't have a scanner at home, your family center had. I had a question. Social Security number. Can you hide the first 5 numbers on official documents, like a transcript? Actually, you should hide the entire Social Security number. I encourage you to I've put Post-it notes over it. I have whited it out or blacked out, but even on an official document, if they want an official document, you can give them that official document once they have made an offer or they request official documents with that. They don't want any part of your Social Security number on there, not even the last 4. So they're being extra cautious. Think about, the big leak that happened. So it's really important. All right. So we want to talk, you've established your account. Now you want to figure out, how on earth do I search in USA Jobs? And some of this is going to depend on, do you have a very specific location? Do you have a specific career field? All sorts of things. Because if you're in the Maryland area and you just type in your zip code, you might get all of Maryland, DC, Northern Virginia. You might get a whole big, huge pile and have hundreds of jobs. So understand that. Remember that current federal employee, that does not mean that you are currently a federal employee. It means you're a federal employee or you have a special hiring preference. When I was at Fort Meade, literally that doubled the amount that you're seeing. Where I am now, if you don't click that, you have 44. If you do, you usually have about 70 some. So you see it's a big difference, and it can be double or more. So make sure you click that. When you're doing an advanced search, and part of where this becomes important is, you'll notice at the bottom, and you can see it in your book, I think that one's on page 17 is you can actually save those, or sorry, it's on 16. You can actually save your searches and have them emailed to you. If you look at all the different categories there, you can save by keyword, by pay grade, by jobs, occupational series or job category, location. And for every single one of those, you have up to 10 things that you can save in those. But you can actually have your searches emailed to you. So I moved here, I took a demotion to stay in the federal system, and I had it automatically email me at the level I was before and 2 pay grades up every single day that anything new popped up. That's how I found out early about 2 different positions that I interviewed for later on. So definitely have it emailed to you. I encourage you, if you're really trying hard to get into the federal system or get back in, have them do it daily every time something gets updated. One of the things I saw when I was in Maryland is the time on some of these, it's minimum time, and it's not just because they already picked somebody. It's because sometimes they get over 1,000 applications. The other thing that we started seeing in certain areas is we're taking the first 200 applications. Well, if they're only taking 200 and sometimes they're getting over 1,000, you need to get your application in quickly. So as you're going there, we found, in this case, we did our search and I found one, and I purposely chose a non-Department of Defense agency because as a military spouse, you have the Priority Placement Program for military spouses, which is only for Department of Defense. For that program, they evaluate a federal resume and say, this is what you qualify for. This is the pay grade. And then if something in that particular job series at that pay grade opens up, they contact you. You usually have less than 48 hours to apply. But outside of Department of Defense, you also qualify for a non-competitive appointment eligibility. So you'll see at the very beginning, it doesn't say that military spouses qualify. However, when you read the full document, you see I have highlighted military spouse. It showed up 3 times. So it wasn't up front, but when you read the whole job posting, you'll see. So make sure if you find something you're interested in, that you read that whole job posting and make sure that you can't apply as that current federal employee. I see a lot with the VA, they will have a position that is internal candidates only. Now, often they'll also, the following week, have another posting for U.S. citizen. For the VA, they tend to promote from within. They aren't going to necessarily let you have that military spouse preference with that internal posting. So it just depends on the agency. This particular agency said yes. So I always love that when that happens. The other thing I want to note on here is there's an additional position. Apply for both. Believe it or not, there are times when you apply for the jobs with the exact same resume, answer the questionnaire the exact same way, and one of them, you're not among the best qualified, and the other one, you're referred to the hiring manager. Sometimes it's just the pool that applies for that position. Sometimes it could be 2 different people that are evaluating it. You never know. So always, if there's 2 positions, they're the same, apply for both if you can. The next section after we pull our job posting, we found it, is you have your job duties. So this is an accounting position. It asks you, I have several questions, so I will get to those. Let me finish this slide first. It's going to talk about the major duties. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to look at this and you're going to think about this, okay, 2 levels up from this position. What is it they're really looking for? So, there's just a lot of things. The other thing you want to look at is, can you break this up into maybe 3 to 5 hats that you would wear? Basically, you're trying to figure out, how are you going to organize this? If you're thinking about an outline, these would be your Roman numerals normally. I'm going to stop real quick and I'm going to go. I have a bunch of questions. So I'm the spouse of a veteran who has 100% disability. Yes, you are actually eligible to apply under the derived preference. So you're taking your spouse's disabled veterans preference. If you look at, go to fedshirevets.gov, it's going to explain that whole process to you, what documentation you need. So definitely, and you can apply, you look for jobs under current federal employees. Most positions will take a disabled vet. It's called a derived preference. So you're getting that preference from that disabled veteran. So again, that's fedshirevets.gov is going to be your key website. And military spouses, they have a lot of good information on there for you too. Thank you, Jessica. Appreciate that. And okay, what does a series and grade mean? Okay, good question. So the series is the career series. You can actually find the career series at opm.gov. It is under the, I'm actually going to pull it up, opm.gov, because this is actually very important for you. It's under the policy, and you're wanting to understand the classifications. And it gives you very specific information about what that classification entails, what the qualifications are. Okay? And for Julie's, I want to make sure you must be a U.S. citizen to apply for federal jobs in the U.S. for most federal jobs. There's very few that if you are not a U.S. citizen, you can apply for. So I do want to add that as a clarification. And the grade is actually the pay grade. And again, opm.gov is going to explain those to you. Also, if you go on to USA Jobs, they have a help section. Go through there. There's all sorts of great information on there, tons and tons of information. And finally, you wanted to know about applying for overseas positions. And if you are not a U.S. citizen, that sometimes those positions, they have local national positions. So that might be a really good fit for you. You can actually contact the bases over there, but you can also look through USA Jobs and you can specify your location. And Maria wanted to know about the case where a spouse is also a veteran. Apply as both. It's not one or the other, it is both. Definitely, that's very, very important. I say do everything you can, use any little bit that you can that might help. So good question. All right, so let's get back to our job posting. We found the posting, and if you remember here, it gave you an overview of the job. It gave you who can apply. The next thing I went through was the duties. So what is it that this job does? So think like that manager. Step back and think 2 levels up. What is it that they see this person does? And where that's important, because that's who you're addressing, that manager that's 2 levels up. Then you need to look at the job requirements and qualifications. If you do not meet the key requirements or qualifications, then don't even apply. Because even if they have nobody else apply and you are the only person, if you do not meet the minimum qualifications, they have to repost the job and they have to change those qualifications. So you must meet those minimum qualifications. I've had a number of people but I really want this job. It would be perfect. I know I could do it. If you don't meet the qualifications, you can't. One of my friends wanted to apply for a position. It required a licensed clinical social worker. If you are not a licensed clinical social worker and that's your education requirement, they can't even look at your resume. So please understand that. Again, you see here, and I talked about this earlier, U.S. citizen is required. In most positions, they are. Okay. And somebody's asking me about a master's degree, and if you're working on it, requires. So a lot of times, and that's a really good question, there's qualifications. You can qualify under education, or you can qualify under experience, or it can be a combination. If it requires a master's degree, and it will often say you must have your degree by a certain date. What you can do is, if you're close, and let's say the job closes on May 1st, and you're going to have your master's degree on June 1st, I would contact them, explain your situation, because there is a contact us button on that you can contact. There's at the very end now of the job posting, there's not the contact us button, sorry. The very bottom of the job posting itself, there is a contact. Contact that person and find out. Explain your situation. If you meet, again, a lot of times it's or, sometimes it's and. This particular one says you have a bachelor's degree in accounting, including 24 hours must include 6 credits in business law, or this. So as long as you have one or the other. Sometimes it is a strict education requirement. I know there's a number of positions that require a very specific type of engineering degree. There's others that require social work. So we've read over the job description. We think, I can do this. We meet the qualifications. Now, how on earth do we apply? And really, it gives you a lot of information. It gives you, and you'll notice I highlighted, link to questionnaire. I put a big box around how you will be evaluated. Read the job description. Read everything on this posting. Click on the links. Find out what they lead to. And yes, it's a lot of information. Here's where, to me, the federal process is easier. A lot of times I'm given one paragraph when I'm applying for a corporate job. With a federal job, I'm given pages and pages of information. I know exactly what they're looking for. You notice here I have 2 arrows on the link to questionnaire. The questionnaire is probably the most important part of the job posting itself, because the questionnaire is really the very first time they vet you is how you answer the questionnaire. Then they're going to verify your expertise against the questionnaire. Did you show them how you're an expert on your resume? That's all done by hand. So the questionnaire, the first initial thing is that's an automatic, yes, you're qualified, yes, you don't, you meet the minimum qualifications. That part is automated, but from that point on, it is done by real live people. There is no machine. There's nothing there going and looking for keywords. It is live people doing this. And they're HR specialists. They're not IT. They're not nurses. They're not whatever other type of position you are. They're human resource. They may understand a lot about the position, but they might not. So you have to explain it in the terms that they give you. So this is where that questionnaire becomes very important. The number one reason people are not selected is how they answer the questionnaire. The other thing it tells you in here, it tells you there's a whole required documents. It says your transcript, your SF-50, and that is a form. If you're a former federal employee, you will have an SF-50. If you are a non-appropriated fund former employee, because there is a transferability, there's another form and they'll tell you what it is. If you look, most positions even give you a checklist. So you can go down that checklist. Oh, I've got that. Oh, I've got that. Oh, I've got that. So definitely make sure you're uploading everything. And if you're currently going to school, so just like Wendy said, she's in the process of getting her master's. She's about a third of the way through. hey, upload the transcript of what you've done so far. You can even include the class load you're taking this semester. That shows them you're working on that. It can be to your advantage. Now, my favorite part, the questionnaire. The very first part talks about what are your, just general qualifications. Where do you want to work? What are your preferences? When can you start? The lowest pay grade you'll take. All sorts of very generalized questions. It's the very first vetting. They're going to ask you your email address, some other things. But then you get to this part, and it says, I have no education, training, or experience, and I am too lazy to look this up on Google. 2, I am considered an expert. I'm the bomb. I am awesome. You need to hire me. You want to be at least 90% expert level. And if you look, they even explain, how are you an expert? You've supervised the performance of the task. So you could oversee, you could supervise, you could manage somebody. You've trained people formally or informally. And that one's not on here, but a lot of times it is. And the third thing is that you have created documentation, standard operating procedures, continuity binders, checklists for how to do the task, something. So again, it's supervised, managed, oversaw, led, something like that. So you're in charge of it. You trained people formally or informally. It does not have to be in a classroom setting. It could be sitting one-on-one and doing it, or over the phone. And finally, you created documentation, maybe even to help other people. That's what you have to document on your resume. And this is where a lot of people, they'll say, oh, I'm an expert, but they're not showing how are you an expert on your resume. The first vetting, if you're not an expert, if you haven't even bothered to look it up on Google and you don't have any education in it, then you know what? Okay, you're not going to make that first cut, but that second cut is somebody looking at your resume against this job posting and questionnaire. So make sure you're covering all of those things. And you'll see there's some of these. I've seen one that was 83 questions that had expertise level. Now, a lot of them were repetitive. A lot of them were very similar, and you're going to find that in your questionnaire. Okay, so we've got through this long job posting because they are long and there's a lot of information, and we understand that. But how on earth do you create a resume from all of this? So we need a foundation. If you think about an outline, remember those things you did in high school and middle school, and you had to do the Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, and then underneath the Roman numerals, you had to have A, B, C. Okay? So your Roman numerals are going to be your job duties. You want to figure out what 3 to 5 topics, hats, however you want to call it, what types of tasks, 3 to 5, there are in those job duties. Now, sometimes, and actually the past 2 jobs that I applied for, they actually broke the questionnaire into subject areas, and it told you what area, like this is on training, this is on analysts, this is on supervising. So that made this really easy because I'm like, oh, well, there we go. There's my topics. Okay, but what I actually do is I cut and paste the job duties into a Word document, and I actually make them all caps because that's easy for me to understand. And then I take the questionnaire. That expertise level is so important. I cut and paste those questions into that document and figure out where of my 3 to 5 topics do each of those questions fit. This becomes my foundation, my organization. That questionnaire, if our job duties are your Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, the questionnaire is your ABCs. And again, a lot of times you may have 30, 50 questionnaires, questions in that questionnaire that are asking your expertise level, but you might be able to combine 5 of those into one accomplishment statement. So don't, freak out about it. A lot of it's going to make, when you do this, it's going to make so much sense. And it's like, oh, this is so easy because it shows you everything. I'm not going to say it's not time consuming. When I do a corporate resume, it's going to take me an hour or two because for 2 years, I lived, breathed, and ate resumes. And probably about 30% of what I did was federal resumes, helping evaluate people's resumes, helping them figure out how to write it. Because I believe I want to teach you how to fish. I want you to learn how to do it so you can do it on your own. You don't need me to do it. You need to learn how to do it. That's my goal. So, my federal resume, if I really want that job and if I'm going to take the time, it's usually going to take me 6 to 8 hours to write to everything with the federal resume because I do a lot of little things and you'll see as we go along. But you've got to address that questionnaire. You have to show your expertise. Tell them how you are that expert. You managed, you oversaw, you trained, you created documentation. Use action verbs and create that accomplishment. You have to show off what you've done. And if you think about an accomplishment is what you did, how you did it, and most importantly, what were the results? So if you think about a situation, so believe it or not, I ran a cemetery at one time. So our cemetery was in the red. That was my situation. What I did about it was I created an automated billing system. I looked at our expenses, reduced some of our expenses, and I evaluated our processes and procedures to see could we save money on internments or by maybe contracting it out. And what was the results? Within 6 months, we were at a break-even point, which was our goal. So that information, if you can add quantifying information, think about how many customers did you serve? How many dollar amount, was it worth? The percentage, I increased the revenue by 7%. So think about how can you add quantifying information? And I have to say, when I was doing the cemetery job, I wasn't into this quantifying information. I don't have dollars or numbers or percentages. So which kills me because now I understand the value of it. So don't be like me. Start tracking this stuff. If you have a friend who's still at that company, see if they can get you that quantifying information if you don't have it. Talk to your old manager if you have a good relationship. I have a manager who actually went back and got me some of that information. So I was able to find out what was my budget? How much did I increase sales? That type of thing. Okay. Maria has a question on, before I talked about if you're not expert level 90%, that's an approximation. Sorry, my mouth isn't working. As you're evaluating, how are you, are you expert level? If you can't honestly say that at least 90% or about 90%, especially if you're in a major area where there are lots and lots of people applying for those jobs, if you aren't expert level, then the likelihood that you're going to make it to that hiring manager is not really great. So that was from multiple people in Maryland. Even here where I'm at now, I'm at a small installation in Wisconsin. They say the same thing, at least 90%, and some people say 95%. So it just depends on who's applying. If it's a really rare type of position where not many people are qualified, you might be able to get by with less. Or if it's something where there's a huge shortage. But again, those accomplishments related to your questionnaire are going to show you how, okay. Very good question. The rating, I'm just talking in generalities. They're not going to rate you, they're going to rate you based on your expertise level, how you qualify for the job. It is not I don't have the exact way they rate you. what I've had hiring officials and human resource people tell me is on that questionnaire, if you cannot say that you're an expert level 90% or more of the times in those, whatever they're asking, the likelihood of you being referred to a hiring manager is not very high. Likewise, if you are not documenting how you are that expert. So if we go back one slide, you've got to show that how you managed, oversaw, trained, created documentation for those items. These right here, I don't have any education or experience to, I'm an expert. That's what you have to document on your resume. And you have to have it flow. And sometimes that's a challenge. So that's where, it's important to really cover this. My experience section, where it just talks about my past 10 years, because that's all I include, it's my past 10 years, ends up being about 5 pages. Now, I'm a little higher GS level. If you're entry level, it might be 3, but 3 to 5, even a little bit more of your experience is very adequate. Use the resume builder. Do not try to create it on your own. I did it. Like I said, 30% of my job when I was for 2 years was dealing with federal resumes. I use the resume builder myself. I don't try to upload. Now, I may take a resume that I've downloaded and edit it, but it's too easy to skip because things that are in your experience when you use the resume builder, they ask you how many hours per week you work. You know what? If you were a veteran and you deployed, I know you are not working a 40-hour work week. You are probably working 60 or 80 hours, and you should be putting that, okay, because they understand that. What they're trying to do is to get to that magic number of 1 year's experience at the next lowest level. And that 1 year's experience does not have to be in the federal system. It can be as a volunteer. I have over 3,000 volunteer hours doing family programs at a very high level. That counts as work experience. Volunteer work is work experience. It can be volunteer work. It can be part-time work. It can be work wherever. It does not have to be in the federal system when they're looking for that 1 year of experience. So understand that. So next, let's talk about a little bit about education and training. There is an education section. If that position requires and has an education requirement. So this particular position had an education requirement to have so many credits of business law, so many credits of accounting. I recommend you actually put accounting, X number of credits, and you list your accounting courses. Now, I don't put intro. I might put advanced, but I'd never put intro. I'll just say accounting. 2 semesters at X number of credits each, or, basic accounting, something. But if you're an engineer, you have similar requirements, and and scientists as well. So if there are the education requirements, do the HR person a favor. Make it easy on them. Specialize in there. If you did a capstone project, you're working on your master's, you do a thesis project, and it relates directly to the position you're applying for, detail that experience. You're given, I think it's like 4,000 characters. You're given a lot of room in there. So detail that education. If you have a bachelor's of business degree in finance and you are applying for a job in a social services network that's not financial counseling or something like that, you don't have to put your minor on that. You can just put bachelor's of business administration. Use those kinds of things. Make your education relevant to the position. One of the other sections is the training, and that is separate from the education. As you're listing your training, and I see a lot of military do this where they list every single training they have. It's training relevant to the position. So if I'm applying at a family center, I might have the FEMA training that talks about opening up something and opening up an emergency center. So I have this FEMA training. So if I'm applying at a family center, even though it might not be part of the job, I may put that training towards the end because it's beneficial training for that organization. But I'm not going to necessarily put my training as a Girl Scout volunteer leader or a Cub Scout day camp chair. So I'm really going to focus that training on that position. Think about how does the training you have really apply to that, and think of the order. What's the importance? Here, this is an accounting. If you've done some continuing education units that are related to this particular job posting, to the questionnaire, list them in order of importance. Affiliations, that could be, definitely professional organizations. If you have a certification, you should have the certification there along with the certification number. You might also have the certification on your first experience area before you even get into the experience. You put certified, like I'm a certified workforce development professional number, blah, blah, blah. I put that, then I go down 2 lines, and then I start putting my experience. So it highlights that particular certification right up front. If you're a nurse, again, highlighting that certification, that qualification, that RN right up front is helpful. Same thing with the CPA, but also do it under your affiliations. Professional publications. This is one a lot of people don't think about. I have written a lot of training curriculum. That is a professional publication. I've written blogs. That is a professional publication. I have friends who have written multiple and been published in different magazines and newspapers. I have a couple friends who've written books. So, put those things under professional publications. But again, relate it to the position. If I'm going for an accounting position, do I want to put that I wrote a children's book on deployment? Probably not. Now, if I wrote a children's book on managing money, yes, I would want to. So think about, what does this hiring official need to know? What does that HR person who's going to look at my resume need to know? References, put them in the order 3 to 5. One of them hopefully is one of your more recent supervisors. Make sure you're talking to them. If you get called that you get called for a interview, contact your former boss or whoever's on your references. Let them know, because there's a good chance they're going to be called. So, make sure you let them know, hey, you may be called. This is what I've applied for. Additional information. It gives you room to add additional information. There's also a place you can upload a cover letter. I actually sat on a hiring panel, and somebody had written the most amazing cover letter. Her resume was our number 1 resume. She addressed why she wanted the position, why she was qualified, and not repeating what was in her resume. And she was able to convey her passion for the position. So write a cover letter. If you're going to have a cover letter, make it a good one. There's some cover letter builders, different places. There's a lot of recommendations on how to write a cover letter. Make it a good one, because it can make a difference. If you are a military spouse and this is a position you're applying for because you have been contacted that it meets, you're registered for the Priority Placement Program for military spouses, and they called you about it. they are not allowed to interview you right now, which drives me nuts as a military spouse because I want to see what kind of work environment. However, there is nothing that says you can't ask your former employer to contact their counterpart if you're applying for that position. There is nothing that says you can't go into an office and introduce yourself and say, I wanted you to put a face with the name. There's nothing that says you can't do that. They cannot contact you, but nothing says you cannot contact them. Could somebody hold that against you? Maybe, but maybe somebody would also think that's a really good thing. So if you're a military spouse, at a minimum, cover letter, letters of reference. If you're coming from a federal position, before you leave, have your supervisor contact their counterpart at your receiving installation. That can make a really big difference. And it actually helped me where I ended up. They were very relieved to hire me after hearing from my boss. And there were 2 PPPs and I ended up getting the position. So, it's definitely, there are no rules saying you can't contact them. But under that priority placement program, they cannot contact you and they can't even do an interview. So it's all on your paperwork. This is why it's important that as you get your experience together, that it's logical and it makes sense. So read it out loud, have somebody else read it, check it, double check it for errors. And reading it out loud is going to catch grammar errors. Having somebody else read it, I am not good at proofing my own work, but having somebody else read it helps. Write it, step away for an hour or 2. Go back, read it out loud. I keep saying that because makes such a difference for people to do that. It really, really helps. Okay, and all right, so our takeaway. The big thing to me is that the federal job, the way the federal jobs are posted, really gives you a lot of information. And I think where people think it's so hard is because there's so much information you have to sort through it. But if you think about how does the process work and really try to understand it, this is a process that is labor intensive, both on your end, but also on the other end, which is part of why it takes so long. What we would hear from recruiters when I was at Fort Meade, and literally there were times they would get 1,000, 2,000 resumes. The average for one recruiting firm was 250 resumes per job posting that they posted. Now, in the corporate world, they can put the resumes in a pile. They go through them. They literally spend 6 to 20 seconds. Usually, if it's a recruiting firm, more on the lines of 6 seconds per. So think about how your resume has to look and what are they looking at. But they're just going to take that first 10, 15 that meet the qualifications. Well, federal, there's all these laws. They cannot just take the top 10 or 15 from the pile. They have to go through every single one that makes it through that initial vetting from the questionnaire. So once that, how are you that expert? Do you meet the minimum qualifications on that questionnaire? If you pass that, every single resume that passes it is being looked at against that resume. Make it easy on yourself. Make it easy on that HR person that's looking. And really cover everything. Okay? It really can help. So definitely think about it this way. Get it out of your head that this is a hard process. It is more time consuming, but man, they give you everything you need to succeed. So don't really think about that. Okay? Understand that. Okay, I have one
more question. Somebody suggested to somebody that she place a reference or two after each job listed in experience section. If they cannot contact your supervisor for one reason or another, and I would kind of try to explain that, maybe they're not there, that might be a good idea. They're not going to contact every single one, okay? For the PPP program to register, first of all, you definitely need a federal resume. Do not try to use your corporate resume because they're going to evaluate you based on those qualifications. So pull a couple jobs in your career field and really address everything. If you have not been able to reach people, I know Air Force and Navy centrally processes the PPP program. If you've not contacted your family center to find out a specific point of contact, I would do so. If you can't get a response that way, contact me and I'll see what I can find out. Because I've got a couple contacts that are Navy as well as my former colleague when I was at Meade, she's Air Force. So she understands how that process worked because she just registered herself again as she PCS this last summer. But that is a really good question. If you are registering for the Priority Placement Program, have somebody at your family center look at your resume. They should have an employment readiness program. They should have somebody that can look at your resume, contact your family center, take every single workshop you can on the federal process. I often tell people the Army, they've paid for every installation to have a 10 steps to a federal job certification to be able to teach that. I would tell people, take it once, start working on your resume, and go take it again. Now we're recording this webinar, so start working on your resume. Listen to the webinar again. If you have questions, feel free to email me. Question for the resume: should we focus on the duties in the job announcement to address our skills and accomplishments on the resume? So the duties is going to kind of form your, it's going to help you organize and kind of, you're going to be able to break it into 3 to 5 hats that you wear or types of duties, whether it's accounting, administration, auditing, something like that. So you're going to have 3 to 5 hats. But where you really need to focus on is making sure that you are addressing how you are that expert from that portion on the questionnaire that says, I have no education or experience and I'm too lazy to look it up on Google. You should never, ever, ever have an A, because at least you can look it up on Google or Bing or somewhere, to I'm an expert. Ideally, you want to be that expert level. And for sample federal resumes, if you are in the Army, if you're Army affiliated, to include a retiree or you're near an Army base, you can call them up and ask them to for access to the database that has some sample resumes, which they do have access to. I will see if I can get permission to share that. I am not positive, and I don't want to do that without permission. So if I can, I will post that on the Military Spouse Advocacy Network's employment section. I'll post that on that website. Okay. And contact information, we got that. And good question. Sarah asked, and I should have mentioned this. What do you do if you've been referred and you don't hear back? So the process can take a long time, and especially if there is a clearance required. At Fort Meade, when I left, the time to get the clearance was about 6 months. So sometimes by that time, the person who had accepted has already had another job. They will then a lot of times go to the backups. So, if you don't hear anything in a while, follow up. send them a very nice, very professional email, or leave a very nice professional message. They'll give you a phone number and or an email address. If they have both, do both. If they just have one, do one. Include the job announcement number. Say something like, "Hi, this is Rose Holland. I applied for position number blah 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 blah. I see, it's been kind of out there that I was referred, but I haven't heard anything. I'd really appreciate an update. And if I wasn't offered an interview, if I was not chosen to be interviewed, if you have any feedback at all, I'd really appreciate it, because this would have been the perfect job for me." Leave that kind of message. Twice, I was actually able to get a wonderful response. In one case, they helped me understand why I wasn't referred. In another case, they said, "Hey, we couldn't even look at your resume. We had somebody that was on the priority placement program." So, if you go somewhere and somebody else has been hired and you're like, "Hey, I was way better qualified," don't say that. Do the contact us, find out why. A lot of times, again, remember those laws and regulations they have to follow. It is very, very different than the corporate world. They have to go by very specific standards. So, definitely ask. You may not get a response, but guess what? You might. And that person may really help you improve your resume. And if nothing else, that person's going to remember your name because you were nice. Because think about how many nasty people they get who didn't get a job, who wanted a job. They do get a lot of nasty calls, which amazes me. Be the super, super nice professional. "Hey, I just so want to work there. Please tell me how I can do it." And it makes a difference. It helps you stand out. Thank them for helping you. Understand that if you're on an installation, I know at Fort Meade for a while, our person who was doing it, she had quite a backlog because this was an additional duty. And it is very time consuming. I know Rhoda would take about an hour to 2 hours just to evaluate the resume. And then she'd be sitting down with you one-on-one for 1 to 2 hours. That's a long time. And this is just an additional duty. So if you're finding there's a huge backlog, contact your installation and say, "Hey, there's a really big backlog." We had a couple people put in an ICE comment in the Army. You have the ICE comment, and they were actually able to get overtime approved for HR so they could catch up and so they could maintain on top of it. So don't get mad at the messengers who maybe don't have the time, but find a way around it. If you're not hearing back, call and ask. Okay? Oh, ICE is also in the Air Force. And actually, Jessica, I want to thank Armed Forces Insurance, who has generously donated so that we can give away those wonderful Starbucks cards. And I am going to let Jessica take over. If you have any other questions, I'll be monitoring and I will reply in the chat box.
Hey everyone, it's Jessica. I am the Director of Marketing and Communications here at Military Spouse Advocacy Network, and we have 5 $20 gift cards to give away tonight to Starbucks. These were randomly picked people of the people that joined tonight. I can see that everybody that joined over here on our side. The people that are randomly selected have been Gilles Epauletly. And if I mess up your name, just know that my name is Jessica and not Jusica, like you probably think when you see it in the chat box. It's okay, and I'm sorry. The other one is Bill Arnon, Sarah Kiley, and Yoli Rodriguez, and then John Neely. I am also going to pop this in the chat box right now. So I do have your email addresses, and I will be emailing them to you shortly after our webinar tonight. And I'm going to hand it back over to Rose so that she can actually end the webinar for you guys. And thank you guys for coming out. We really appreciate it.
Please do. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. It's at employment@millspouseadvocacynetwork.org. We have recorded it. Hopefully everything worked out well with the recording. And one of the things that we will do is we'll post a link here. We also want to thank the Military Spouse Employment group on Facebook who came up with this wonderful idea to hold these webinars and to help our military spouses. So please, definitely, let them know. And yes, you're right. There is a typo in the email address. It should be network, not net or network or however. So do, just kind of change that up when you email me. Feel free, definitely email me if you have questions. Let us know. If you have ideas of how to make this even better, let me know. I have started working on part 2 of the Federal Employment Toolkit. So part 1 really focused on the job postings. It has a lot of information on the Priority Placement Program, as well as the military spouse appointment eligibility that allows you to apply as a current federal employee. So definitely, let me know what you think. Part 2, I'm working on it. I'm hoping to finish it this fall, and we'll make sure we get that out in as many forums as we can. And the Federal Toolkit is on our job site. It is on, I think it's on the front page, but it's also in the employment section. And we're going to close out. Thank you, everyone.